Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. This month I'm going to troubleshoot a common issue that we have as artists, especially artists who work from photographs, and that is how to punch up the contrast on a blasé photograph and make it a little bit more interesting as a piece of artwork. So I have here a picture of a dancer, and she's wearing light colors, she's light-skinned, the background is white, the floor is white, and there's a white window here. Not surprisingly, she's getting very washed out. So this month I'm going to show you how to increase the contrasts and make realistic drawings that have a little bit more interest. So let's get started here. Whenever you're drawing a portrait or a full figure, start with the overall size that you want the picture to be. And when you're drawing an entire figure, it's really nice to know how long the figure is in terms of head length, so that you don't wind up making a head that's too small, too big, or a body similarly disproportioned. So the first thing that I'm going to do with my drawing here is to tear off a piece of the side of this margin and use it as a measuring stick. So I tear it off, I lay it on her head, and I mark the top of the head and the bottom of the chin, and that is my HL head length. Then I'm going to move down the picture and I'm going to make little marks at every head length. If you have a piece of paper like this where the photo is printed out, then it's really handy for marking those head lengths right on your reference material. It's not as easy on a photograph, and sometimes it's not even possible. But not including her top head, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.5 head lengths. So she is, from top to bottom, 5.5 head lengths tall. I can also get a quick measurement in terms of width. The shoulders are about 1 head length as well. So if she had her arms straight down, that would be about where her shoulders end. So then I will come to my paper, and if this was my head length, then that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And that would make her pretty nicely proportioned on the paper. So now I'm going to sketch out what I see using these head length marks as guidelines. So you see that the first head length is going to end right at about the bottom of her rib cage. The second head length is going to end at about her crotch. The third at about the upper knee level. The fourth mid shin, and so on. So that is going to give me a lot of guidance in building this character in terms of the largest shapes. So I can go down 1, 2, I know that this is the crotch length 1, so her other leg is going to be coming out at this level. And the second head length here should coincide with the top of the knee, then the mid shin, and then the bottom of the heel. So the front of the toes dips down a little bit more than that. But if I sketch like this, I get those large shapes in place. I can draw her arms sticking out, make them approximate. And as I sketch out, I'm also looking for the way that the large shapes correspond to each other. So, for instance, a straight line drawn up from the tip of the knee should coincide with the elbow on that side. When you're doing things like this, though, just make sure that you keep your lines going nice and vertical. If they start tilting off to the side, then it's not going to be helpful anymore. And then, of course, I need to go back and start to clean up those lines. In this first stage of cleaning up, you still need to concentrate on making your lines very light, because you're probably going to have to erase them again and possibly even a third time. But the first stage of drawing is to get those large shapes down on the page and to get them down accurately enough so that you can start to sort of form your model almost like you're building her out of stone or clay. You have to whack off big chunks at first, and then you can start to see how they interlock together and work together. And initially it's all about those big shapes. Now I want to come back and do a little bit of measuring again, because if I were to drop a line straight down from her fingertips, straight down like that and straight down like that, I would like to get a measurement in terms of head length of just how long it is from fingertip to fingertip. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And then I also want to notice the central line that goes through the body, because you have to get this accurate, otherwise your person won't look like she's balanced. So get a triangle. If I have a line that goes straight through her head, right down the middle of her nose, then that line is going to be right on her front toe, which makes perfect sense because, as I'm sure you know, that's where your balance comes from. So, going back to my drawing, I need to make sure that a line that went straight through my figure would also go straight through her big toe. And as you can see right now, it doesn't. So I need to make that adjustment. I can also use those head length measurements to see that the knee should line up at about the first head length. So that would be about right here. And it's much better to know sooner rather than later that you need to make adjustments to your big shapes. Especially when you're drawing a person balancing, make sure that you get that central line and get it accurate right away. So here would be the bottom of her heel, here would be her toe, and then I can just refer to the marks that I developed by measuring things in terms of head length and giving that vertical line to see where everything else is supposed to line up. Alright, now I am very much more satisfied with the elements of my Tiny Dancer, but if you can see, it's very smudgy and there's this big heavy line through there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my light box and trace this picture onto a clean sheet of paper. Then I'm going to come back to you and show you how to start adding the details of your face. After retracing my lines, I came up with this much cleaner version, and I am ready to add my features. But start by giving yourself some guidelines for the eyes. Her head is straight and facing straight forward, so her nose is going to be right in the center vertically and her eyes are right in the center horizontally. Then since her face is so small, I'm just going to give myself a little bit of shadow indication, so I'm not doing a lot of fussiness on those features. And then I can erase my guideline, and you may have to redraw your features after erasing. Very good. Now I'm going to start to add some base tone. So just over the top of the hair, following the direction of the hair growth, I'm adding some tone. And then to the skin as well. Really, really lightly using the pencil on the side. All of that skin needs a base tone. Once I've laid down a base tone, I'm going to blend with my stomp using little circle strokes, and I'm going right over the top of the face and the hair. I'm not stopping at the edge of one, but you'll notice one thing I am doing is I'm leaving some highlight shapes. So especially here on the hair, there are going to be some white areas, and on the top of the arm, leave a highlight edge. It's contrasts, plays of light and dark, that add interest to your sketches. So when your lighting isn't very good, the easiest way to fix that is to really punch up those contrasts. And then before I go much further, I'm going to add some tone to the leotard as well. I'm going to keep it very light, so I'm really just looking for some shadows, and I'm adding the tone there. Here under the knee, for instance, where you know that there's a change of plane going on, just emphasize the slight shadow that you see in the reference. There's a shadow cast on the leg from the skirt, so I'm making that a little bit darker. And then there are going to be some shadows in the sleeves, but for right now I'll just sort of scribble those. And then I can blend those with my stomp too. Notice how I use circle strokes to disguise my pencil lines. Now I'll use a clean sheet of paper to protect my paper from my hand. I'm going to go into my face and lighten up some of the areas that got a little bit too smudgy. I'm looking for the light highlights that I see on my reference material, and I'm just going to emphasize those. So the bridge of the nose, one side or the other of the cheek, places that are supposed to be sticking out to catch the light. These areas I'm going to keep very light. Then I'll go back with my pencil and I will re-emphasize the darker areas. And to do this, I'm just paying attention to my reference material. I'm looking for the contrasts that are already there. I'm just punching them up on my drawing. When the face is very small like this, you really need to rely on those large shapes because you can't put down the details, even all the details that you see, or it's going to look overworked. And especially children's faces, when you add too much detail, you age them. So just be really mindful of that, be very careful. And when you're working small like this, just always err on the side of less detail than you think you need. I'm really just putting some marks down in the general vicinity of the shadows, the strongest shadows that I see on the face. So corners of the mouth, under the nose, the eyes themselves. So you do want to include those, but just don't overwork it. And then I can start to add some of the really important wrinkles that show the movement in the leotard. So remember to look for the point of origin. What is causing the tension in the fabric? Your wrinkles are going to radiate from there and then move upward, the same direction of the movement of the arm. And in the skirt, we have a drape fold that falls straight down, and you see some half lock folds and draping and some interesting things going on here. So just pay attention to your reference material and put in the wrinkles as you see them. Now as for the background, you need at least a line to show that she's standing on something. So to do that with some accuracy, I'm going to get my triangle again, make sure it's straight, and then just put down a quick line. And if you want it to look more like a ballet class, maybe you could add some windows in the back or the bar. That's entirely up to you. But now I'm just going to go on one more pass, darken up the shadow shapes that are the most important. After a little bit of refinement, here is the original piece, boring, blasé. And here it is when you punch up the contrasts. It looks a lot more interesting, I think. And there's still a good movement going through there and the good composition. So I will upload the reference material for you, and just as you work, remember some lines are very strong, other lines you want to have very faint. That's going to add interest to the piece. And then of course punch up your contrasts. But also don't forget the importance of starting with an accurate drawing. That really can't be overstated, especially when you're working small like this. There's just no room for error. So that concludes this month's drawing tutorial. I hope that you've learned something that you can take away with you to your own studio. And as usual, thank you so much for watching.